Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Cody. And how do you say your last name?
Lowry, Lowry, and hello to you, Christina.
Hi, Cody Lowry. Welcome to Savvy Broadcasting Unleash Your Story. We're so grateful to have you here this evening sharing Schmooze, what they should teach you at Harvard Business School, but probably don't teach you in any of the major schools. But you're going to share your wonderful, hilarious, upbeat book on how people can really make those deep, long-lasting connections that you want to make to both not only grow your business, but to go places in life. It's really important to know how to make those connections. So welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Schmooze comes from the Yiddish word schmoozen, which means to chat idly in a friendly or persuasive manner, so as to gain favor in business and connections. And a lot of times, schmooze takes on a negative connotation. My good friend Dr. Nito Quibane says that today we live in the most connected society in the history of the world, and yet we are more disconnected than ever before. So schmooze is really about hearkening back to the days when we'd look people in the eye, we greeted them with a smile. Our word was our bond, and our relevance wasn't based upon likes and looks.
Boom. Boom. You could take a person at their word, which is something sorely missing a lot these days. But I like what you say, because in this Zoom world, which we're not on Zoom right now, we're on another platform, but on Zoom or all these other digital platforms, podcasting, they're wonderful. They do offer a way to connect, but often people forget the actual really connecting, getting to know the people. Often in the past, when I've connected with people, like, I just want to sell, I just want to get my stuff out there. And they're not realizing that it's really starting with building relationships.
Well, it really is. In the book, I talk about the secret sauce: build the relationship, get the client to trust you, and then never let them down. And I must tell you, Christina, we have clients on the books for over 30 years. Now, some of them, are my best friends. But with that said, it's about building that relationship first, and you build it quickly. Most people don't realize that when you get in front of somebody, maybe somebody that you might be working for or making a presentation to, they're making a value judgment about you within the first 30 seconds. So you got to be ready. And then trust, that's the cornerstone of any relationship. And you've got to get the client to trust you. I'm in the advertising business, and there's a lot of moving parts. A lot of people say, "Oh, you're in the advertising." Oh, well, I wish I was in. Well, it's a lot of hard work. It's usually 6 days a week, and it's probably a 50 to 60 hour work week. And with that said, at times, our people have screwed up, right? And they'll come to me, "Oh, what do we do? The media didn't run. This was wrong. That was wrong." Nothing is better than the truth, and I've lived by that. And if your client trusts you, chances are they're going to stay with you a long time. And then the third is really important, and that's making sure that you at least you endeavor never to try to let the customer down. Be there for them. I'm in a business where I still have people. I'm their blankie, right? They call me after hours. They'll call me on the weekend, and you got to be there for them.
Yeah, you make such great.
Go ahead.
Go on. Yeah, I was going to say you made such great points there, because I think people fail to realize. I'd worked for a company many years ago where the receptionist was not keen or understanding who to send people too. So she was just sending them all over the company. And often I would get phone calls to me at the company. I was in accounting, and they said, "I've been tossed around to 10 different people. It seems like all you people care about is getting us to sign on the dotted line." And then you're like, whatever. And I felt really bad for them. So I made it my mission to kind of hunt down in the company. And mind you, there were several thousands of people in this company who were the people for them to speak to, because I didn't want to be that person on the other side of the phone. So it is so important. And, no matter when you get a client signed up, yeah, it's great. You got that sign up, but that's not where it ends. That's where it begins.
You're absolutely right, and I can tell you
Mhm.
a little tactic that your listeners and viewers might be interested in. Whenever I had a meeting with a CEO or somebody that that decision maker,
Mhm.
before I went into that room, Christina, I knew a lot about that person. I knew the college they went to. I knew where his kids went to school. I knew the clubs he belonged to. I knew the charity he belonged to, and I would in that first meeting I would ask him all of those questions, and I would be in a situation where my competitors coming in, they weren't on the common ground that I was because I knew all of that stuff. And another little sidebar to that, when you look that CEO in the eye, if you really want to get him to open up, you say, Mr. Johnson, how did you get started in this business? Well, sit back because they've got a lot to share with you.
Mhm. And a lot to teach if you're
Uh,
open to learning. And that's I think some people come in and they're so apt to try to prove how great they are. They just shut down. It's like, let me just prove to you how awesome I am. Like, just chill. Just let them, talk, let them teach you something. It's okay if you don't know everything.
Yeah, and I will just say this that the book Schmooze is,
Mm.
it could have been called Persistence. It could have been Communicate Like a Pro. But the
Yeah.
sizzle in the book is, setting up a meeting with the President of the United States in one week, getting a baseball signed by the Pope, carrying the torch in the Olympic torch relay, getting
Mm.
a Super Bowl ring from one of NFL's Hall of Fame coaches, auditioning for Saturday Night Live within a 48-hour notice. But
Mhm.
when you get past the sizzle in the front of the book, it's really about what we just talked about. It's
Mm.
building relationships. It's about a winning smile, making a great
Mm.
first impression. It's about being kind to all, and it's about really looking out for the little guy.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I read that. Yeah, getting the president in one week, getting to meet him. How did that work out? How did you make that? Is it because you had built those long-term connections over years that you were able to make that ask?
Well, it's quite a long story, but the president was coming into town, and my employer was a big supporter of Jimmy Carter. Do you remember Jimmy Carter?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I was a
Yeah,
kid, but I remember him. Yeah.
yeah, and he's still charging today, which is so good. But he was coming into town, and I said, well, if he's coming into town, why don't we see if we can't set up a meeting with him? And I must tell you that my employer, who was Anthony Abraham, he was really apolitical. He liked Republicans, he liked Democrats, he liked independents, but
Mhm.
in the summer of '76 when Jimmy Carter was having such a actually it was '78 I think he was
Mhm.
having such a difficult time. Inflation was at 14% and what have you. And
Yeah.
Mr. Abraham ran three full-page ads in three of Florida's largest newspapers, the Miami Herald, St. Petersburg Times, and the Tampa Tribune. And it was an article written by Walter Annenberg, and the title was "The Summer of Discontent." And basically, the whole thrust of the article was, whether you agree or disagree with the president, he's the only one we've got. So I suggested, why don't we
Mm.
set up a meeting with the president? We'll get this newspaper ad, we'll put it on a plaque, and
Mhm.
you know, well, it wasn't as casual as that.
Yeah.
He looked at
Yeah.
me and another guy was in the room. He started laughing. He goes, "Yeah, well, why don't you see what you can do?" And
Mhm.
and so I got on the phone. I called Jody Powell's office, who referred me to this office, and they referred me to that office, and finally I got somebody in the scheduling office, and
Mhm.
he listened to what I wanted to do, and he asked me. There was already the PR person was already in town. Quiche Legrand was her name,
Mhm.
and he set up a meeting for me to meet with Quiche, right? So I go to the hotels, and she greets me, and I kind of explain what I'm doing and what I want to do, and the president is a big supporter. Or my Mr. Abraham is a big supporter of the
Mhm.
president, and we'd like to meet him for a few minutes if that's possible.
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, let me check, and I've got one person I've got to talk to." Well, I knew she was the big decision maker. So the only other
Mhm.
person that could have made that decision was the president himself. So when I left the hotel, and it was, they had probably 20 people running around doing this, all the kinds of things you'd expect with the president being in town.
Yeah.
And I went to a bakery in town, a Leslie Bakery. It's world famous here, right? And I had 3 cheesecakes sent to the room with a little note. Thank you, Quiche. I appreciate the time today. Whether we can or can't meet with the president, I'm very, very grateful. So she calls the next day, and she said, Mr. Lowry, we've arranged for a meeting for Mr. Abraham to meet with the president. And I said, oh, that's great. And she's going over all the kinds of things that has to be done, checking him out and what have you. And I interrupted her, which I'm apt to do with anybody. And I said, well, Keish, is there any way that I might be able to go? And she said, well, that's not really going to be possible. And then she went on with her whole list of things that had to be done. And she said, so we will see Mr. Abraham on the boom, boom, boom. And I said, Keish, before we go, is there any way I could go with Mr. Abraham? And there was a pause. And she said, Cody, I'll handle it. Thanks for the cheesecake. So there you go. That's part of the schmooze. And
The schmooze.
yeah. So, but the book is loaded with really good advice for everybody says, well, what demographic is it? And I've got people 65 plus that read it. I talk about staying relevant in your retirement, and then they want to get the book for their grandkids. There's a great chapter in there about schmoozing from the podium, and the things that you need to do to make sure that you're confident at the podium, and that's a whole list of things. But the book is doing quite well, as a matter of fact.
That's awesome. I'm sure it is. And you mentioned something very important when you sent that cheesecake. I recall many years ago, there's a job I really wanted, and there was quite a few people hinging for it. So I had gone through seeing 3 or 4 people in one day. And when I got home, I just said, I'm just going to send a quick thank you to the last couple people I saw. And I actually did a letter. And now this is probably maybe 12, 15 years ago. I sent a letter in the mail thanking each of them. And you know what? They said to me they were just so blown away because they don't get letters from anyone. And that is so rare. So to do something like that, I mean, I didn't do a cheesecake, but something to call out and say, hey, I recognized that you took the time to see me. You were gracious. It just makes you stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, it sure does. And the whole book is, as I mentioned earlier, is loaded with examples of, how to be persistent. I always tell people one of my favorite quotes is a Japanese proverb: fall down 7 times, get up 8. And I've lived by that for years, and I learned that at an early age selling newspapers. I used to sell newspapers on the street corner, and people would come by. I was selling the Miami News, and I'd say, would you buy a paper if I told you where you got your shoes, what state you were born in, how many birthdays you've had? And a lot of people would ignore me and keep going. And I'd ask them again the same thing. They'd say, okay, for a nickel, I'd say, you got your shoes on your feet, you were born in the state of infancy, and you've only had one birthday the day you were born. And so I learned persistence at an early age. I learned that no doesn't necessarily mean no. It was really the foundation, I think, for my whole personality and, going forward.
Yeah. And one thing I might add is that some people don't even do the ask. Forget about, asking and getting turned down and getting a no. Some people are just scared to ask. And sometimes, like, maybe we'll go with the job thing. You go in there and they say, okay, the job pays this much and we want to offer you this much. And you say, okay, that's way lower than I, wanted to go. Well, it doesn't hurt to put the ask out there and say, well, my bottom is here. Can you meet that? Because you just might get a yes if they're really interested in you. But you wouldn't know or even get the option of a yes if you didn't even put it out there.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I can just, if you will let me just embellish just a moment on that, selling the newspapers. I used to get 30 papers on a Saturday, and My manager gave me 50 that day. I mean, and I knew there wasn't any way I was going to sell 50 papers. But around 6 o'clock, it was getting dark. I went across the street to a delicatessen called Wolfie's. And remember, I'm selling the Miami News, and the first thing I see is a guy selling the Miami Herald, the Sunday edition of the Miami Herald. I'm selling the Saturday Miami News, which is nothing more than a fish wrapper compared to the Miami Herald, which at the time was probably bigger than the New York Times. And I go up there, I've got 12 papers left, and he's giving away the Heralds, right? And, if I was a little smarter and maybe not 11 years old, I probably would have just given up right there. But I parked my papers about 10 feet from where this guy was, and everybody that came out of the restaurant, I gave them an enthusiastic pitch. Paper, sir, paper, ma'am. And then this guy comes blowing out of the restaurant, definitely in a hurry. Paper, sir. And he keeps going.
Yeah.
And now I go after him. Sir, would you buy a paper if I told you where you got your shoes, what state you were born in, how many birthdays you've had? Christina, he turned around so abruptly, I thought he was going to hit me.
Oh.
And then he looked me up and down. And, I looked like the Artful Dodger who needed a good haircut, right? And he said, son, how many papers do you have left? And I said, sir, I have 12 papers left. He said, well, that's exactly how many I want. And then I want you to go home. And, in the book, I talk about being kind to the less fortunate and reaching out. And I learned at age 11 that very lesson from this gentleman.
Well, that was phenomenal. And I know just from the tips and the stories you shared today, I know you've enlightened our audience so much, but I don't want us to leave without them finding out how they can get their very own copy and find out more about you. How can they do that?
Well, they can go to wherever books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. But I will tell you this, my email is myschmooze@gmail.com, myschmooze@gmail.com. And I would love to hear schmoozing stories from your audience. And the first 5 people that ask me for a book, I will sign the book and I will overnight it to them. So...
Well, thank you. That is an amazing, gracious gift. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Cody. I really appreciate you coming today to Savvy Broadcasting and sharing your wisdom. Thank you.
Christina, it's been a delight. Thank you so much.
You betcha. Take care.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.